Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wondergoal, the soccer betting podcast from the Action Network, presented to you by Bet365. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me, as always, is my co-host BJ Cunningham. And together, the two of us are going to break down the first 8 matches of Copa America, starting on Thursday, June 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will kick this thing off with Canada and Argentina. Argentina are the tournament favorites, and they are obviously a whopping minus 334 favorite at Bet365 on the three-way line against Canada. The Maple Leafs coming back at plus 850. The draw here is plus 450. I don't have much here. I do tend to think along where you're going a bit here. I'll get into it later, but BJ, where do you see betting value for the Copa America tournament curtain raiser?
Yeah, I like under 2.5 goals at plus 110. So the thing about Argentina, and we didn't talk about them much in our preview podcast because they're the favorites and rightfully so, given the path they have. But they are one of the most difficult teams in the world to beat. Like, no duh, they won the World Cup, right? But what makes them so difficult is not because they have Lionel Messi, Lautaro Martinez, Julian Alvarez. It's actually because their defense. Um, their defense during these 6 World Cup qualifiers in late 2023, they allowed zero point 0.3 expected goals per 90 minutes. And only France, since since September of 2021, has created over 1 expected goal against them in regular time. So they're generally a team that not only do they uh, do they have a great offense, but they are incredibly good at just shutting matches down, like from the start. If they get a goal, they're very, very conservative of how they actually go forward. They generally like to control the ball, don't like to take a lot of chances. They're a very good tactical setup team, or similar in the same aspects as a team like Germany, for example, that will use the concepts of vacated space really, really well. But they're very difficult to play through. They're very good in transition, unless you have like really, really good transition attackers, which Canada, you could say, does. But Canada or Jesse Marsh, they're going to set up in a 4-4-2 low block. They're not really, I don't see a scenario where they're going to come out and press Argentina a lot. So it's generally going to create a very slow type of match to open up this tournament. So and Argentina unders have just been hitting at a crazy rate for a long time now. So under 2.5 at plus money. I think ending plus money is good. Only projected 2.3 goals for this match. So a nice boring under to open the tournament.
Yep. I'm going to walk down that same path. I think that this thing starts slow. I think Canada will try its best to remain in this game as long as possible, keep this thing um, as tidy as possible as they possibly can as a big underdog, knowing that goal difference could play a pretty big role in whether or not they get second in the group. So I think the 0-0 first half market is pretty good at plus 240 at Bet365. I just think this thing starts slowly. Sure, Argentina probably nicks it at the end, but it'll take some time to get there. That's how I'm playing it. So that's how we see the first match on Thursday. There's also one match Friday, June 21st, between Peru, who are plus 333 underdogs on the three-way line, against Chile, who are even money favorites. The draw here is plus 210. I've got nothing here, so I'll just pass it all on to you.
Both teams to score no, minus 140 for me. Good tried and true. Back to it. So I mentioned this in the preview pod, but Peru is just horrible offensively. They have no real pieces in their attack to speak of. They're very transition based. Like, they rely on a few transition attacks, but they're not generally good at even getting shots off of those transition attacks. These two played in November in World Cup qualifying. Peru had 0.13 expected goals and 4 total shots in the match. Now, the flip side is Chile is a team that is actually a pretty good ball progression team. Like, they were number 1 in these 6 World Cup qualifiers in progressive passes and passes into the final third. When they get into the final third, that's where things tend to fall apart. They only averaged 1.1 expected goals per 90 minutes. And I went back and looked, Michael, when these two played in Chile, both teams scored no closed at minus 175. What has happened since that point that should drop this number down to minus 140 just because it's on a neutral field? Because I don't think it should. So I projected this more north of minus 200, and even the total is, sitting at 1.5. So both teams to score no at minus 140, kind of just targeting mainly Peru not to score. But again, Peru's going to sit in a low defensive block, and Chile's pretty inefficient in the final third. So both teams score no at minus 140.
Okay. Things start to pick up from there. We go from one match a day to two over Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for the first round of the group stage. Ecuador and Venezuela up next. This one's 6 p.m. Eastern time. Ecuador is odds on minus 125. Venezuela is plus 350, and the draw is plus 260. Like you, I think that the underdog has some legs here. We are not totally convinced by this Ecuador side in this group. I think that the gap between these two sides is pretty minimal. And this is if you look at the way the group's set up, this is a huge match in this really soft Group B, which is Ecuador, Venezuela, Mexico, and Jamaica. So this is the one to get for both of them. I guess you can argue that a draw would suit both of them, but I think that an Ecuador win here, just given the gap between the two sides, is not out of the question. So plus 350, I think, is fine.
Yeah. So yes, I'll be on Venezuela plus a half at plus
Excuse me, I meant Venezuela, not Ecuador.
Yep. Venezuela plus a half at plus 110. So these two played again late in World Cup qualifying, late 2023, in Venezuela. That match ended 0-0, and there was a total of 0.7 expected goals. Ecuador only creating 0.26 of those. But that match closed, Michael, as a pick'em in Venezuela. And generally in international football, home field advantage is worth about 50 cents on the line. So if we're going to be going from minus, Venezuela was, plus about plus 170 both ways, you probably should be getting Ecuador on a neutral field down to plus 120 in that range. And I get it. Like, from a talent perspective, yes, Ecuador's got plenty of talent and a lot more than Venezuela here. But Venezuela is a very good team defending in a low defensive block. They can beat you in transition, and the underlying numbers were incredibly impressive for them. Third best expected goal differential of anybody during those 6 World Cup qualifiers. They only allowed 0.8 expected goals per 90 minutes. And again, that match that ended 0-0, like, they kind of outplayed Ecuador. They limited them to just shots from outside the box. And that's generally what Ecuador kind of settles for. So I think I think the number's just too high here on Ecuador. So I like Venezuela plus a half at plus 110.
Yeah, these matches, especially between the South American teams, it's akin to like divisional matchups in like baseball or college football, where they're just so familiar with one another. You think about European World Cup qualifying, there are just so many more countries in Europe. So in South America, these teams are just playing each other nonstop. They play each other World Cup qualifying, then Copa America, then World Cup qualifying. It's they're so familiar with each other too. So that usually leads itself to these like lower event games when they do take each other on. 9 p.m. Eastern time, Saturday, June 22nd. The other match in this group is Mexico as a minus 163 favorite against Jamaica. Jamaica is plus 475, and the draw here is plus 280. I just don't have it in me to go with a shot on the underdog here. You think this could be one-way traffic for El Tri?
Yes. So we didn't talk about Jamaica a lot in the preview, but there's some things happening off the pitch for them that is not generally good. So Leon Bailey, who is their best player, is not going to play for them. They put him on the roster. He's had a big argument with the Jamaican FA, basically saying like, they don't provide much for them, and it's a very different experience than what it is at Aston Villa. So it looks at the time of recording this, it looks like he is not going to play. Which if you look at Jamaica per transfermarket.com, Jamaica's total squad value is about 94 million. Leon Bailey makes up 42 of that. So he is generally everything, not only to their attack, but just their entire team. So the other aspect of it, though, is that even though, Jamaica has some names that you might recognize, from Mikel Antonio to Damari Gray to Ethan Pinnock, since September of 2021, which is kind of the date I'm going off of for a lot of these things, because it's still within the cycle and it gives us about a 20-match sample size where, it's at least big enough because we don't just have that many international matches. But Jamaica has a minus 0.94 expected goal differential per 90 minutes. They have played Mexico 3 times, twice in World Cup qualifying, where Mexico outcreated them 5.2 expected goals to 0.3. And then they beat them in the Gold Cup semifinals, which was a little closer on XG, but you got to remember Jamaica brought everybody to that tournament. Their AAA squad, and everybody else, at least the top sides, didn't. So, and even when Jamaica played Canada in their 2 Nations League, which was essentially a playoff to get into Copa America, they got very well dominated on XG, even though they made it here so far. So Mexico -1 at -110 for me. They've dominated Jamaica in all 3 meetings. Jamaica is a very low block transitional type team, and Mexico, although you won't have some of the older names that you might recognize, this is still a very good team and a team that's very versatile in what they do tactically. So Mexico -1, projected Mexico closer to -300 than -175. So I like Mexico -1.
Okay, that brings us to Sunday and brings us to the opening match for the Yanks. USA is a -500 favorite against Bolivia. The Bolivians are 16-1 on the three-way line. The draw here is +525. Uh, yeah, there's not any value on US here. And
No.
as we've said, the Bolivian side is so dependent on its distinct, highly unique home field advantage in South America. They won't be getting that here. So this does set up for what should be a match where it just is about how long it takes the United States to unlock Bolivia. And you can make an argument that that's not something that the U.S. will be all that comfortable in. We've seen in previous iterations of the Americans, they do struggle to get these ones over the line. But I do think that this does play into the US's hands. If I was to bet anything, I would look at the US team total over 2.5 at even money. I think you can go a little bit beyond that as well if you wanted to go, to something into like the alts, into like 3.5. I do think that this sets up really well. Or the other option there is to go with like the US to win to nil in like some sort of same game parlay where the you're betting the US to score a bunch and Bolivia not to get on the board. I do have some confidence here that the United States can put up a crooked number, BJ.
Yeah, it will just kind of be, that's one thing. It's just like, the United States at times, not always, but at times have struggled to break down low defensive blocks like this. But this low defensive block just flat out sucks outside of Bolivia. If you want like an image or a similar type of team, like Bolivia is like is like a lot like Costa Rica. It's a 5-4-1 low block. It's very, very passive, but generally very difficult, or they're very bad at denying space through the middle. And they are also very game state dependent as well. Like I said in the preview pod, like they've pulled off some upsets in Bolivia. They have literally not even drawn a match outside of Bolivia since September of 2021. They're very, very bad. Talent wise, tactically, like it's just a really bad team. So I don't fault anybody if they want to bet the United States, put them in a parlay, put their money line in a parlay with somebody, maybe Brazil and one other team, maybe Brazil and Argentina. But yeah, I mean, I have this projected pretty close to what the market actually has, right around United States -2. Should also mention, if you want to see any of my projections, they're pinned to the top of my Twitter page. So if you want to go check those out for Copa or Euros, they're there. But yeah, I'm just passing on this one. Hopefully, the United States gets off on the right foot here, but yeah, they're generally priced probably accordingly to where they should be in the market.
Yeah, I mean, you'd expect there will be times to bet um, on the US. This is definitely not one of them. In fact, I think if you were to play anything, it would probably be, on this just the straight like money lines. It would be going the other way. Let's talk about the other match in that group, which is Uruguay and Panama. Uh, Uruguay, which is a team that you and I thought has some serious legs to win this whole thing. They're -300. The Panamanians are 9-1. The draw here is sitting at 4-1. It's another pass for me. I think that the when we get to USA and Uruguay, like that's when we'll start to have a pretty compelling match to bet. But like a lot of this Copa America, you'd have to do some pretty deep digging, I think, to find value
Mhm.
here. And I'm just not comfortable doing that.
I think Panama is actually going to be kind of a live dog in this tournament, in a sense. In this match, maybe so. Because if you look through what Panama has kind of done lately, I know it wasn't the United States AA squad and they did kind of overperform, but they did beat the United States in the Gold Cup to get to the final. They housed Costa Rica in the quarterfinals. And then when they played Mexico in the Nations League semifinals, I know they lost 3-0, but they controlled well over 50% of the possession. They outshot Mexico 19-6 and then racked up over, close to 2 expected goals. Now, it's not a squad that has, a ton of talent, a lot of guys playing in MLS or Mexico. But they are a very direct transitional type of team. So this match could end up very back and forth with Uruguay because that's obviously how they want to play as well. Um, but I'm going to just say be careful with this Panama team. Like they're not like Costa Rica. They're not like Jamaica. They're actually a pretty pesky and a decent underdog. So when they play the United States,
Yeah.
I mean, get ready for it because they're actually not that bad. So for me, it's a pass here, though. I generally, if you had to play anything, I would maybe take a look at Panama and some spreads, but I don't really want to bet against the team I picked to win this tournament. So I'm passing.
Okay, the last two matches for this episode, Colombia and Paraguay at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, June 24th. Colombia minus 433, Paraguay plus 450. The draw is plus 250. Um, Aside from it being it's going to be a really nice, aesthetically pleasing matchup given the kits that these two teams wear,
Yeah.
the beautiful yellow jerseys from
Yep.
Colombia, and then Paraguay usually has something crazy for us with the red and the white, and sometimes some stripes, some checks. This year, it's just like almost like an Atletico Madrid kind of situation, but
Hmm.
it should be a lot of fun to watch. Um, I'm with you here. I think that Colombia is like a decent parlay piece, and we're a soccer podcast, so trying to find something else to parlay them with, whether it's in euros or in maybe you want to maybe USA -1.5 and Colombia -140 money line. But I think that this is a decent chance to get on Colombia. I think that this line, like you think as well, is a little too short.
Yeah. So Colombia and Paraguay played the very last World Cup qualifier in late November. And Colombia won that match 1-0, and expected goals were 2.5 to 0.7. Now, Colombia does leave the door open to themselves a lot because they are a team that is going to press from the front. They are going to create very high event type matches just by the way that they play. But as I mentioned with Paraguay, there's no offense to speak of with this team. They have scored 1 goal in the calendar year. Like that's it. I get that they have underperformed, and yes, they probably are due for a little bit of positive regression. Yes, they have Enciso. Yes, they have Miguel Almiron. But they generally just settle for way too many shots from outside the box, as a lot of these teams in South America do. And if you're going to do that against Colombia, like playing transitionally, like you have to be able to create big scoring chances against them and take advantage of the transition opportunities they're going to give you. In the last meeting, they only created 0.7 expected goals, Michael, but they had 11 shots. They had the same amount of shots as Colombia, and that's how much lower quality their shots were comparatively to what Colombia gets. So, I mean, I projected Colombia at -154, so like there's really not much value here, but I want to bet against this Paraguay team whenever I can because there's just no offense to speak of. So I'm going to be on Colombia -140. They have way more attacking talent than Paraguay does. Paraguay is a decent defensive side if you can get them, if they can sit in a low defensive block. But Colombia is going to do everything in their power not to let them to do that and get in transition moments, just like they did in the previous match. So I like Colombia -140. I'm just really looking to fade this Paraguay squad whenever I can.
And we'll wrap up with with Brazil and Costa Rica, 8 p.m. Eastern time on the 24th of June. That's Monday. And wouldn't you know, Brazil is a massive favorite. Excuse me, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Minus 700 on the three-way line for Brazil, Costa Rica 18-1. The draw is 7-1. I think you can probably just play some Brazil odds. You can play uh, some goal scorers. You got to wait for the lineup. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of folks to get among in terms of those markets, but I have a pretty hard time seeing Costa Rica do anything here, BJ. And those are famous last words because
Yeah.
they were quite a ridiculous roller coaster ride in World Cup 2022 when we had talked about them perhaps being the worst team in the field.
Yeah. Well, Michael, if you looked at expected goal differential, they were the worst team in the field. Um, so I before I get to Costa Rica, I want to go into something about Brazil, and it's going to be a little philosophical because I think a lot of people will look at their World Cup qualifying in late 2023, and you'll see that they lost 3 straight matches, that they drew against Venezuela, and that the numbers just were terrible. But I think this is one of the very, very rare instances where you can take those results and you can throw them directly out the window. Because they were under the management of Fernando Diniz. And if you want to get into like a deep philosophical thing, discussion on him, he is a big believer in relationism. And essentially what Brazil was doing is they were playing a style of positionless football where they were trying to get the most guys they possibly could around the ball, play quick passes, always trying to overload through every single phase of buildup, which is, a philosophy that's big in South America. Whereas in Europe, it's very positionalism, right? Like very structural in terms of buildups and things like that. And if you want to go like there's a video that the purist did on YouTube, which is it beautifully lays this out. But essentially, is this: when you have most of pretty much all of Brazil's players now playing over in Europe in a positional system, and you bring them back over to South America, and you have somebody playing them in a relationism, they're not used to playing that. And when you have so few training sessions to try and drill that in, they struggled. Like they couldn't really play his style of play. Yes, if they had more time, like maybe it would have ended up working out. But it just was one of those things that didn't really jive and just didn't really work with the players because of what they were doing at the club level. So they go out and they hire the Brazilian Ancelotti. And now they're setting up more like Real Madrid, where it's like out of possession. We're going to play a passive 4-4-2. We're going to press sometimes, but not really. But really, what we're looking to do is we're looking to play in transition, right? Like we're trying to get Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo and Rafinha getting in behind defenders, getting in 1v1 situations, and causing problems that way. Costa Rica at the World Cup was obviously in a group with Spain and Germany and Japan. They beat Japan in one of those matches that will go down in infamy. But against against Spain and against Germany, they allowed 11 goals and 9.3 expected goals. They did score twice against Germany, but
Yep.
the problem, Michael, is, and this is kind of my point, is that when you are a very passive team with no talent and you concede early, and you have to come out of your defensive block against elite teams, that is what happens. You get just the score ran up on you over and over and over again. And since Brazil is now a more transition-based team and they're not very like this relationism, possession, like slow build-up type team, they're going to punish Costa Rica over and over and over and over again because there still is no talent on this Costa Rican side. Even in the qualifying for this, Costa Rica played Panama in the quarterfinals, and they got beat 6-1 on aggregate. They beat Honduras to get here, so congratulations, good on them. But this thing has just blowout written all over it. So I like Brazil -2.5, plus 125. I think that this generally gets out of hand really, really fast, and is going to play out very similarly to how their matches against Spain and against Germany did at the World Cup.
Alrighty. So that is the first 8 matches. Real quick, we'll give out a best bet if you got one. What would you tag as your favorite play for for Copa America, the first 8 matches.
Yeah, first match of the tournament, Argentina and Canada under 2.5 goals at plus 110. Argentina is the most difficult team to beat in the world. That's not really a shock to anybody because they are the reigning World Cup champions. But what they are incredibly good at, Michael, is they're an incredibly good defensive team. Over the 6 World Cup qualifiers in South America in late 2023, they only allowed 0.3 expected goals per 90 minutes. They are an absolutely elite team at shutting matches down once they go ahead. They're not of the teams like Spain or Germany who will try to run up the score. They want to control the ball. They want to control possession. And against Canada, who's going to play a lower type of defensive block or in a 4-4-2, which they do have good ball-winning midfielders and good wingers and good defenders that can keep these type of teams out. But Argentina's matches over those 6 World Cup qualifiers averaged 1.6 expected goals per 90 minutes. So I think 2.5 is generally pretty high here, especially for the first match of the tournament. So I like under 2.5 goals at plus 110.
Okay, and I'll go with Venezuela to pull off the upset at plus 360 against Ecuador. This is a Saturday kickoff, 6 p.m. Eastern time. It's simply put, the gap between these two teams just is not as wide as these odds, which suggest I think everyone is expecting Ecuador to be one of the sleepers in this tournament. I'd go the other way and think that I think Venezuela fits that profile a little bit better. So give me Venezuela plus 360 on Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, pull the upset. Okay, that will do it for this episode of Wondergoal. A reminder that Wondergoal is proudly presented by Bet365, and Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boosts and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. You must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. If you or anyone you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. Okay, be sure to check out the remaining episodes of our Copa America coverage. BJ, Sam Ingram, and I are covering every match of Euro 2024 as well, so tons more to come. Thank you very much to our producer, Noah, for all the hard work, and best of luck, everybody, with your bets in Copa America round 1.